Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will be covering the ice dance event at the 2025 U.S. Figure Skating Championships. This event was won by Madison Chock and Evan Bates, winning their sixth national title, tying the record from Merrill Davis and Charlie White. There are several teams that won 5 national championships, and that's Belbin and Augusto, Puncelin and Swallow, Lang and Turdnishev. So Maddie and Evan have now surpassed those teams, and they looking to hold the record directly next season with their 7th title. And I mention all of that because for the second year in a row, they were dealing with sickness. Last year, it was both of them being sick. Evan especially looking just not really able to skate to a high level last season. And a lot of people said, why even still compete? Like, why not withdraw? Like, they don't need the national title. And Evan said afterwards, well, you never know if this is going to be our last one, which confused a lot of people. Are they retiring? What's going on? And I think it's clear after this nationals, when yet again, this time it was Maddie who had food poisoning. So it wasn't an airborne illness that she could also get Evan sick as well. But it's clear that they want that record of national titles. And by they, I mean Maddie. Because otherwise there's no reason, right, to go out there sick, not being able to eat for a couple of days, having no energy to put yourself through this, just, to win another medal and another trophy. It's clearly that she wants that title, which they have had, we all know, a fantastic career. This is her 14th nationals together. It's their 13th medal. Literally only the first season, when they were 5th in their very first year together, did they not end up on the podium. And I'm not talking about like a pewter. Like, they have 6 silvers and 1 bronze. And that 1 bronze came in the Olympic year that Hubble and Donahue won, and the Shibutanis were 2nd, and they were 3rd, winning the free dance. And they just continue to have an incredible career. And of course, this isn't the extent of all of their medals, because Maddie won a bronze with Greg Zerline in 2011, and Evan won a silver and a bronze with Emily Samuelson in 2009 and 2010, respectively. So they have a lot of medals, right? They have all the things. But so many times I see it for this entire Olympic cycle. I have seen this. People just they're somehow showing up and getting a lifetime achievement award every time that they show up. And I saw several people going, nobody's going to remember them. They're not special. They're just here because they've been in the longest. And I'm like, look, I get it that people feel like, why didn't they just retire when Hubble and Donahue retired? Or, Papadakis and Cesaron. Well, for one thing, Papadakis and Cesaron have 2 Olympic medals, including Olympic gold medal. Hubble and Donahue had already decided they were going to retire. Maddie wanted to move on to other things. She's now got a baby, right? Like Alexa Knierim announced this weekend she's expecting. Like, she was ready to move on with her skating life at the top of their height as a pair skater, because she was ready to start a family, right? Like, people have different goals. And a lot of times when teams get to a certain age, they don't want to get up and put their body through the rigor of going through this every single day. And they do. And Gillis and Poirier do. And Guinard and Fabry do, even though they're in their 30s. And they're not going up there and getting Lifetime Achievement Awards. We've seen plenty of people that tried to go on and they got buried. And perhaps the writing would have been on the wall for them when things didn't go well for them in the 2018 Olympics, right? But instead they decided to make a coaching change and tried to, put gasoline back in the car and refuel up and try something else. And I really think in the past 2 seasons, they have really established themselves as the best team in the world. And for all of the hate that they get, it's just, I feel unwarranted. Now, you're welcome to have your opinions. We all are. There's a lot of takes that I have people are not going to agree with, and they let me know, and that is fine. Right? And I'm not here to be a Maddie and Evan apologist, but I do think that a lot of the hate that they get is just so ridiculously unfair. Because if we go back to the last few Olympic cycles, let's go back to 2014, right? Only Davis and White retire, right? Chock and Bates still go on, Shibutanis go on, Hubble and Donahue come onto the scene, and there are no teams really that are able to sort of pass these teams, right? You can be better and pass the teams or not, and you're stuck behind them, right? After that Olympic cycle, 2018, Shibutanis retire, right? They got their Olympic medal, they retire. There's only room for one other team to move up, which in that Olympic cycle was Hawaii and Baker, right? Who came on to be the third team. And in this Olympic cycle, only Hubble and Donahue retire, which made room for one team, which looked like it was going to be Caroline and Michael. Now, unfortunately for Hawaii and Baker and for all of us who enjoyed watching them skate, they end up basically also retiring, right? Which allowed for two teams to be able to come up. And I mention all of this because with all of the whining and what have you, the debate right now that's on Zingas and Kolesnik versus Green and Parsons, that would not have been a debate if Hawaii and Baker were still around. Like, it would be Carrera and Ponomarenko and the other two teams, and all of these other teams would have to wait. And so it requires for, teams to retire, yes. But in the last several Olympic cycles, we have only had one team retire per Olympic cycle, whatever team it was that won an Olympic medal, basically. And so I get that people are, frustrated. They feel like they're clogging up, but just also know that I don't know that we would have three teams at Worlds in dance if it were not for Chock and Bates. There's not two teams right now that would qualify enough placements for that to happen. Now, the thought would be, well, if they've moved on, then that allows for some other team to move up and blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry, but Christine and Anthony are not going to be on the podium if Chock and Bates are gone. It'll just be Fear and Gibson that would be in that spot instead, right? So I think this is, likely the last year or so that we're going to see this team. Okay? Like, I don't think that they're going to come back to a Worlds after an Olympics. I could be wrong. Some teams do. But I think this is probably going to be their last Worlds when they go to Boston 2 months from now. And I think that the Olympics is probably meant to be their last performance. And hopefully for them, it's good enough to get on the podium. If they win Worlds this year, I think anything other than gold is going to be disappointing for them, for sure. But we'll see. All of that is yet to be seen. But they came here, and in the rhythm dance, I couldn't tell Maddie was sick. Could I tell before and after? Yes, you could see it in her face. But when that music came on, she was on. And I was impressed because last season when they were sick, they looked sick when they were performing. And the rhythm dance here, like, Maddie, they didn't look sick at all. They look amazing. And I gotta say, like, I have been a big, big fan of Gillis and Poirier's rhythm dance all season. Felt like they had the better rhythm dance, especially early in the season when Maddie and Evan had 11 songs. But as what seems to happen with Maddie and Evan and Gillis and Poirier throughout the season, I'm now looking at that Beach Boys rhythm dance, and it feels a little campy. And this dance feels just more refined, and like nobody else could do this but them. And I think that they have managed to pull off all of these songs, and it looks really, really good. And we'll see what happens at Four Continents at Worlds. But we know if they get a stranglehold from that rhythm dance, that they're going to be really, really hard to beat in the free dance. And if they perform that rhythm dance, at Worlds like they did here, I think that, yeah, they're going to win that segment of the competition. Now, the free dance was a little bit different story, was not as strong. It's a longer program, right? A little bit harder to mask, the sickness that Maddie was dealing with. And so they did have, a couple issues here and there, mainly her 1 foot turn sequence, excuse me. The twizzles were also, they weren't off sync, but they didn't do the same number of revolutions. It's actually not a feature, or it doesn't affect the levels, but it affects the GOE. So, interestingly enough, even though they had a 4-point margin between them and Carrera and Ponomarenko, 4 of the 9 judges had Christine and Anthony in first. Interestingly enough, were they sending a message that they felt like they shouldn't have been competing because they were sick, or were they just reflecting like, yeah, that wasn't their best skate? Even Gabby, there was not a world feed for whatever reason on the free dance, and so I had to listen to Johnny Weir and Gabby Papadakis, which I don't have a problem with Gabby Papadakis. They talked so much, it was annoying. But even so, when they finished, Gabby goes, "Yeah, that wasn't the best." And it wasn't, but it still, really, oozed a lot of the flowiness and the vibe that they've been doing all season. And Evan was great. It was just, Maddie wasn't quite her best. And hopefully this will be behind them when we see them again. And I'm actually looking forward to Four Continents because we haven't had a showdown between Gillis and Poirier and Chock and Bates and Four Continents this entire Olympic cycle. Because in 2023, Gillis and Poirier had to withdraw because of Piper's cancer. And last season, Evan and Maddie had to withdraw because they were sick, and it was literally days after nationals, and there was just no way, nor should they have gotten on a plane when they were sick anyway to China. But so we haven't seen it, and we're not going to see it next season because it's an Olympic year. So this will be the only time this Olympic cycle that we would get to see this head-to-head matchup at Four Continents, and it's, for all intents and purposes, going to be the last time that we would see these two go head-to-head at Four Continents. And so I'm excited about that because we haven't had it. All right, moving on to second place here, and that is Christina Carrera and Anthony Ponomarenko. Their rhythm dance, I thought, was just not as strong technically as we've seen from them all year. Like at the Grand Prix, they were matched up with Green and Parsons in both of their Grand Prix. And I thought it was just noticeable how much better Christina and Anthony were than Caroline and Michael. And then we get here at Nationals, and between them and Emily and Vadim and Caroline and Michael, I was like, I don't really feel like there's much of a gap right now. Like, it was kind of weird, really. It was reflected in the scores because they were only a point ahead of the other two going into the free dance, which was really, really weird because it was like, boy, a messed up twizzle or a, fluke anywhere could mean that they would not be in the top 3, which you would have not seen coming into it. Now, that did not happen. In the free dance, they were perfectly fine. They had new costumes. I agreed 100% that Anthony needed a new costume. I don't know what they were thinking with his previous costume. I said it then, it was ugly. This is much better. I don't know why they trained Christina so. I really liked the yellow dress. I thought it was a nice different take on Carmen than like the typical red or black. So now she's in black, and I have no idea why. It was a good performance. I didn't feel like I enjoyed it as much just because it came right after Green and Parsons and Zingas and Kolesnik, who have these really cool avant-garde free dances, and theirs is Carmen, but they still did really well. They've done well all season, and I have no complaints with any of it. I want something more. I really enjoyed their free dance last year, and while I think they do this one well, it's still Carmen at the end of the day. All right, in third place was Caroline Green and Michael Parsons. And so I know they said earlier in the season that he had hip surgery, but I don't know that it was clear that he had torn his labrum in both of his hips. So a lot of times, if you're not super familiar with anatomy, when somebody throws around terms, you're like, what is a labrum? So I teach anatomy, and it's like the best way to describe it is the same way that it was described to me, is like, if you think about the hip, which is like a ball in the socket joint, socket joint. I'm losing it. It's late at night. All right. It creates a lot of friction, right? Because it's a very mobile muscle. It goes in, every direction, circles and up and back and side to side. And so in the hip and in the shoulder, you have what's called a labrum. And it's just almost like a little piece of Play-Doh that just helps to give a little bit more cushion to that joint. If it's torn, it's very, very painful, and it can only be like surgically repaired. And So the fact that he did it in both hips, boy, that's pretty major and pretty serious. And he was probably in a lot of pain last year, especially. So I'm really glad that that's fixed and that he's all healed up. And in their rhythm dance, they actually ended up in a tie with Zingas and Kolesnik, which was hilarious. Now they were third because in the rhythm dance, if there's a tie, then the technical score wins. In the free dance, it's the opposite. Then the second mark wins. It's like the old 6.0 system used to be the same way. So I still feel like that this rhythm dance just feels a little small to me compared to some of the others who feel like they fill up the space a little bit more. But I do really like it. I feel like it's a great mix for their personalities. In their free dance, the only thing was that their twizzles were a little off sync. And when they're on at their best, their twizzles are money together really, really well. Not a level issue, GOE issue, like I mentioned with Chock and Bates. But it's just amazing how much better their lifts are. It has been such a liability for this team for basically the entirety of their careers until this season. And they put that rotational lift in the rhythm dance. They changed that from very early on the season, which was a smart choice. And then like that combo lift that they do in this free dance is just stunning. This program just flows really well. It was like quiet, like their blades were just like they just move as one. I love this program. I love this program. And they had to go out there and perform it really, really well. And they did. And they got just a point higher than Zingas and Kolesnik did to get back on the world team and get third place. And I'm so happy. I'm very interested to see how they do in the ISU championships. At the World Championships, they won't be at four continents. I'll talk about that in a second. They're obviously not in the same boat that they were 2 years ago when they were sixth in the world. But can they get back to being in the top 10? Can they close that gap with Christine and Anthony? And I think that this free skate is a really, really strong vehicle for them. And if they could just work on the rhythm dance a little bit more, I think that would help them tremendously. Fourth place was Emilia Zingas and Vadim Kolesnik. He was another one that was battling illness. I think maybe she was to an extent as well, but him definitely more so than she was. Their rhythm dance, it just legit makes me want to dance. They are so high energy the whole time. I know John Luke Baker was saying on the practice feed that he feels like maybe it's a little too busy, a little too much going on. I'm not mad at it. I mean, if it doesn't stay at that same pace, like, yeah, I definitely get it. But it works for me. And I kind of feel like their last year's rhythm dance, their Michael Jackson rhythm dance was kind of the same way. It was kind of a lot going on as well. But I feel like it kind of works for them. And it's a good contrast to the free dance, which is very, very different vibe. And it was a really good performance. There were no issues. I mean, in the past, they've always been just on the cusp. I mean, if they were just a little bit cleaner 2 years ago, they would have gotten third over Christine and Anthony. It was just like her twizzles that was the difference between them being third and fourth. Last season, obviously, lots of little things that caused them to end up fifth or sixth, wherever they were last year. And here, they were really as good as they could do. I mean, even after they said that we performed at our best and it just wasn't enough. And this is one of those subjective calls, right? Like, I can definitely see for those of you that are like, I prefer Zingas and Kolesnik, totally get it 100%. I personally preferred Gray and Parsons, but it could have gone either way. I think ultimately Green and Parsons, is the right call, but it was close. And gosh, it's just, I said too on social media, like, it's heartbreaking for whatever team gets fourth because they're all so good. And really, for Broe and Somerville, who I haven't gotten to yet either, those three teams are all so good and they're fighting for one spot right now. And the thing about it is 2 years from now, when Chock and Bates inevitably are gone, they're all still going to be fighting for the same spot again. Because even when you have, four really good teams And that's not to say that the Browns don't continue to improve, that Nisette and Markaloff don't, continue to improve. I mean, some other team is also going to throw themselves into this mix. There's just embarrassment of riches that we have, and U.S. ice dance is just unparalleled with any other country. It's just, and I never would have seen that in my life. Like growing up, if you grew up in the 90s with it, God help them, Punzel and Swallow, Gosha and Sir, Lang and Chernyshev, you just could not have foreseen the type of abilities that the teams that we have now, and the type of depth that we have now, and the type of incredible success that we've had internationally. It's just unreal. And it feels like, we just continue to fill that vault, like there's just going to be another team to replace the other. And, but for Emilia and Vadim, this won't be the end of their season, which is really good. I feel like they just build a story so well, and they just have like the right balance in this free dance of like, wow, and just really good fundamentals. And Emilia really nailed her twizzles in both of her competitions, and really all season it's been so much improved over what it's been in the past. Fifth place here was the Browns, and that was a little bit of a surprise for me. I feel like I just kind of like, I don't know if I count them out, if I forget about them. I don't know what it is, but they're always surprising me. Going to Montreal and training with them part-time has obviously just done tremendous favors for this team. My only nitpick is still in their costumes. I still don't love their costumes, especially for Una, but it's such a minor nitpick. And the rhythm dance, the crowd loves the double splits. I saw where NBC was running a reel on that on Instagram and on Facebook. Gage was just really performing during their choreographic rhythm sequence. And then in the free dance, I'm just still really enjoying Gage. He has just become such a really strong emoter and performer. And they do enough to just stay ahead of Broe and Somerville. They do lose to Broe and Somerville in the free skate, but they're able to stay ahead of them due to their lead in the rhythm dance. In sixth place was last year's bronze medalists, Emily Broe and Ian Somerville. They won a bronze medal on the Grand Prix at Grand Prix France this fall after having a really, really disastrous free dance in Canada where Emily ran into Ian and they fell in their free dance. Their rhythm dance, they came out with just slightly different costumes, more bling than their previous set of costumes. They have one of my favorite midline steps. Big issue in this was Emily almost ran into Ian on her second set of twizzles. She ended up with a level 3. It also affected their GOE. They also only got level 2s on their step sequences, their pattern step and their midline step, and that kept them from being with those top teams because they got a 75 in their rhythm dance, and Emilia and Vadim, and then Caroline and Michael got 82. So it was a big, big gap between them and the other teams that there was no way for them to make up that kind of ground. And it was unfortunate because I really wanted to see a top 5 of those top 5 teams, because I really felt like in the free dance, you could really see like how capable they are and how good they are. Her twizzles were spot on in the free dance. No issue whatsoever there. Could not take my eyes off of them the whole time. Like when I'm at home watching, oftentimes I am taking notes, but at times I will pick up my phone. I will be distracted. I'll be going through X or Blue Sky to see what other people are saying. And in the case of like this free dance, none of that. I just was like transfixed on that screen. And this is a program that I have seen several times at this point because this is their second year performing it, right? And it's still really, really beautiful and really, really fabulous. And it sucks for them that they weren't able to duplicate their results of last season or just even get close enough to sniff the podium this season. I still feel like they need to work on their packaging. I mean, if you look at like Emilia Zingas, like she just exudes like, I don't want to say she, I don't know how to put this because they're obviously very different personalities, right? Like if you see Emily like on Instagram and Facebook, like she's clearly looks like she's not a person who wears a lot of makeup or anything like that, which is totally fine. I don't wear makeup. I didn't wear makeup at my own wedding, right? Like it's not my thing, right? But if you're trying to put on a performance, like it's like some people know how to turn it on even if they're shy or what have you. And Emily's a great performer when you turn the lights on, right? But I still feel like, like for instance, like the last 2 years in the rhythm dance, like this year they picked Brick House. Last year they picked When Doves Cry, like Prince. And I just don't feel like they're really good fits for them stylistically. Like they're very talented skaters and they can do anything, but it still doesn't make it the best decision possible. And so when I look at somebody like Emily Zingas, I'm like, they pick the right pieces of music and the rhythm dance for them. Like they've really killed it every single year that they've been together. And I feel like with Emily and Ian, they're still searching for that right piece of music and the rhythm dance. And the rhythm dance is so critical because it puts you in a position to be able to knock it out of the park in the free dance, right? Their free dances have been really good, but the rhythm dances has been really where it needs some work. And of course, next season it's music from the 2000s. We don't yet have a pattern established yet. I don't know what style they should do, but please don't pick something like this. Don't pick some kind of like sexy kind of like it's just not them. I don't know what is, but there's something that's better for them that would be a better match that would allow them to just really take it to the next level. Whereas these last couple of rhythm dances, I feel like have kind of, it hasn't held them back, but it hasn't let them fly either. All right, moving on to the seventh place team, and that was, again, maybe a little bit of a surprise. Katerina Wolfkosten and Dmitry Serebetsky. To me, they kind of lost in the shuffle because they were in juniors this year, and that was really just to get them some more opportunities. They were age eligible, weren't going to get any Grand Prix assignments, or hoping to get a bone thrown at you for a challenger. So going to the juniors helped them get 2 junior Grand Prix, plus they made Grand Prix final, and obviously helped them here because they ended up sort of above some of these other teams who you would think might be above them, and some of the teams that beat them last year at nationals. In the rhythm dance, I thought they had a very good score. They were 6 actually after the rhythm dance because they were Broe and Somerville were behind them, which was an improvement over last year. In their free dance, they were skating to Moulin Rouge, which thankfully they did not use Tango Roxanne. He stumbled in the second set of Twizzles. They have this really effective straight line lift to the crescendo and One Day I'll Fly Away. They're both really good skaters, and I do think that the pairing is working for them. I just want better programs for them next season. They feel a little generic. Like last year, they had this really cool tango. I feel like that worked really well for them. But, I would like to see them, not use some kind of warhorse like Phantom of the Opera or Moulin Rouge, something else that, gives them just a little bit more to stand out, be unique. It's hard to be unique when you're using overused pieces of music, just kind of how I feel. All right. In 8th place was Ava Pate and Logan Bai, and their rhythm dance, great technically like they always are. They just lack polish. Like if they just don't, their movements are just not as refined. It just feels more like high school kids at a dance. And again, they're another team that I don't feel like the last 2 themes have really been super friendly for them. And like with Emily and Ian, I feel like they could just like kill like a waltz, like a good like old pattern. Like and Eva and Logan, I'm like, would a foxtrot work for them? A Charleston, that where they could sort of be kind of frenetic a little bit. I don't know, but I feel like next year they're probably just going to do something again, like that just totally makes them look like they have no rhythm again. I don't know. Maybe they should just do something really out of the wall and pick like rock, like 2000s. Like who's like a good 2000s rock for them? It's not really 2000s rock. Probably isn't really my genre. Like No, Lenny Kravitz is the 90s. That won't work. I don't know. Something. All right, moving on. And the free dance, of course, they had gone back to the Politzovian dances. They did that in the Grand Prix. I did not know this was their third free dance, however. I remember the Hungarian dances that they did early in the season, which I thought was very similar to this one, honestly. But apparently they had started out with a Charlie Chaplin free dance, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of derails your whole season when you're constantly changing what program you're going to have. You know, you never really get comfortable in one particular program. Then you go back to an old program because it is comfortable, but it's like we've already seen it. So, you know, they have some really well done elements and they usually get good scores on those elements. They just need a vehicle that shows them off better, you know, at the end of the day, which I feel like is the same thing I said for them last year. In ninth place was Leon Asset and Artem Markelov. They have two really strong numbers. I think, you know, one of the better teams this year in all of ice dance to have two really good pieces. They have at times been really super this year, and they have at times been not as great. And there's very little difference between the two, honestly, as it is an ice dance, because, you know, a level here or there, you know, is the difference between you being fourth and 10th sometimes. But in their rhythm dance where Twizzles really stand out, I had a little bit of stumble on their ending pose. You know, there's several rotational lifts where people were in the splits in this rhythm dance, but theirs just stands out. I think it's the position of her arms around him that just has more pop to it than anybody else's does. Of course, they have all these cool tricks that they do that gets the crowd on it. And in the free dance, I love how much they really use the music. I downloaded all three pieces of this music earlier in the season. I love love the pieces of music that they use. I know a lot of people call it the Game of Thrones. They're not specifically channeling Game of Thrones. They like have their own story of like a queen and all these things, but it is very Game of Thrones. Let's be honest. Even though I've never seen Game of Thrones, but I'm familiar enough to, you know. And plus, she's got the bleach blonde hair that kind of looks like Daenerys, you know. All right. Moving on to the 10th place team, and that was Annabelle Morozov and Jeffrey Chin. So, in between the last time that I talked about them on the podcast, at Skate America, they have changed coaches. They left Mita with Tanith and Charlie and Greg Zerline and went to train with Marina Zueva. And they also decided to change their programs as well. The free dance, the rhythm dance, they kept the James Brown music, but then they sort of did some different cuts. They had new costumes, which I'm like, why are they changing the costumes? Her makeup was a lot stronger than what it was before. It went from like this very nice girl next door look to like, you know, hooker. Maybe that's a little harsh, but it was very clear that they were trying to amp up her sex appeal and her flirtation. That was not there earlier in the season, and I don't think it worked. I wasn't feeling it, but okay. And then in the free dance, they did a Star Wars free dance earlier in the season, and it was choreographed by her dad, Nikolai Morozov. So it wasn't like they went to Marina Zueva and she was like, we're going to get rid of all things Mita. He had already choreographed that one. And a lot of the elements in that are in their new free dance to Rachmaninoff. Now, I do like this free dance for them better than the Star Wars. I like the idea of the Star Wars, but I like the execution of this one better. But they aren't skating anymore this season. So it does seem like a lot of trouble to go to just use this one time, unless you're going to repeat it and use it again next season. And there were literally, I was like, yep, I remember that move from the Star Wars, and yep, I remember that move from the Star Wars. So I don't know. This is a very interesting team because obviously they come in with a lot of hoopla, right? Annabelle Morozov because of her dad, Jeffrey Chin because of the success that he had with Katarina Wolf-Kostin, and they, you know, at least in this season, weren't able to sort of break out like we have seen. Like when Emilia and Vadim came on the scene, they were fourth in their first nationals. Now they're fourth in their third nationals. They've sort of been hovering around the same area, but they were just like lit out of a cannon, right? Katarina and Jeffrey, when they were on, were fabulous, right? And so I still don't exactly know how this pair is going to pan out. And there's so much competition in the U.S. But I do think that this is a team that, U.S. figure skating wants to see do well, but I think they've got a lot of work to do because I don't see the potential with them like I see with some other teams who are doing better than them. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future with this team and under their new coaching team. And 11th place was Conscious and Shepetov. They did a cover of Elvis in their rhythm dance, just high energy, really fun to watch. Also had a really enjoyable free dance. But the last team I really wanted to talk about was Vanessa Pham and Anton Spiridonov. And I said when him and Lorraine broke up last season that he would get a partner before she did. And such as it was, he was here, she was not. She actually had a tryout with Jeffrey Chin. Obviously, that did not work out. I think at this point, it would be surprising to see her resurface with someone at this point. It's just harder when you're a female, and it's harder when you're a female at a high level like Lorraine was. So, but here's Anton with a different partner, and I thought that a new partner for him would make him look better. And I didn't really think that he looked better, but I do think this is a better match for him at the same time. I was shocked that they're at Ice Academy of Montreal. Like, shocked. I feel like they're usually a little bit more selective about the teams that they take, and we've already got several American teams, and like, this is the team that you picked? Okay. Okay. They got 64 points in their rhythm dance, which I thought was generous, frankly. I mean, obviously the top teams were getting, 80 plus, and that mid tier was getting in the 70s. So they weren't next to the mid tier, but to me, they weren't really any better than some of the teams that went before them that were scoring, in the high 50s. So that was interesting to me. In their free dance, I liked a lot better than their rhythm dance. Some cool moments in the program, like they have this curve lift where she's like intertwined in his legs and he's in this really deep plie. Their character step, I thought, was a bit of a ripoff from Gillis and Poirier, or they were trying to do like a tango in the hold, basically. But, interesting. We'll see how they progress. And then also just want to give some love for the team that finished in 13th, Amy Sway and Rogers. There in their free dance, they kind of had a moment, kind of like Evelyn Grace Hans did in the pairs event. Just like they missed a position in their straight line lift a little bit earlier in the program, but they got back in it. But the end just kind of fell apart, like with the choreographic assisted jumps and the choreographic twizzles, and they were 11th after the rhythm dance, just banging on that top 10. Then they ended up 14th in the free to finish the 13th. So that was a bummer for them, but they had a great rhythm dance. All right, Pamchinko Award. For me, this was Green Parsons free dance. I just thought it was stunning. For me, it was like just one of the moments of the whole event. Now, I will definitely give honorable mention to Zingas and Kolesnik's free dance, who I also thought was just very, very strong as well. But for me, the moment was Green and Parsons. Their free dance is just so good. So big props to John Luke Baker, who choreographed that routine. All right, so looking ahead to this coming weekend with Europeans, we've got a very, very hot contest between Farron Gibson and Guinard and Fabry. I feel very strongly that Farron Gibson are either going to win Europeans or they're going to get on the world podium. I don't know that they're going to do both, but I feel like between those two competitions, one of them, they're going to come out on top because they've had a very, very good season. Guinard and Fabry have not, and they've been so incredibly close. I just think that they get them in one of these competitions. Maybe it's this weekend, maybe it's in Boston, but I feel like they do. And I think that the third place contest is also going to be really interesting. Obviously, all the momentum is with Lopareva and Brazeau, who made Grand Prix final, who have a really cool free dance. They've also got a really unique rhythm dance as well. So they, to me, look primed to be the bronze medalists this year. But obviously, we've got, big contenders with Smart and Deke, who have had just a huge rise throughout this season in both of their programs, especially the free dance. But in their last Grand Prix where we saw them, they scored tremendously higher in the rhythm dance too. They're going to be in the mix. We've got Reed and Ambrulevicius, who were last year's bronze medalist, who, came into the season a little late, programs weren't quite all the way there yet. Have they had time to sort of get them? I really like the puppeteer free dance that they have. Can they find their form again? We've got Turkula and Verse Lewis, who have a really awesome free dance again. They struggle with their levels at times, but 2 years ago, they were the bronze medalists at Europeans. Can they get back into that conversation? And I'm also going to throw the Tashlers in there as well, who have, very strong fundamentals, who are always very close, but just like on the cusp. So it should be a very competitive event, and we'll see who comes out on top. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the ice dance event this weekend. Definitely leave a note in the comments and tell me what you thought. Who were your favorites? I'll be back with the singles. Look for that in your podcatcher tomorrow. All right, guys. I hope you have a good rest of your week. Take care.